Okay, we can officially begin. There's that echo again. We've got a few technical things we're trying this evening, so we'll see how it comes out in the end. I've got an echo. Do you guys hear the echo? Great. You have it back on or?
No echo out here.
Well, I'm glad you're good. All right. Counselors are starting to add up here. They're showing up like crazy. Hey, Jonathan, Jane. So thanks for joining us tonight. We don't have much business to take care of tonight. Should be able to get to the counselors pretty quick. Call the meeting to order, and usually we go through our minutes at this point. I ask you guys to approve the minutes, except we don't have any minutes. One of the things I forgot to do over the long holiday weekend was to write up the minutes. I'll refresh everybody's memory. In November, we had the budget people here. We had a really good budget conversation in November. And then in December, we had a social hour with no agenda and just open discussion. Turned out to be really well. So we're going to try to do the same thing tonight as we start the new year. This time, the topic of discussion will be our city councilors. And what I've asked them for is just the general expectations, resolutions they might have for the year. I've heard them, I've copied them, and hopefully they'll tell you the same thing. So I don't think, let's get into our normal police report, and I'll mute myself here.
Larry, we can't hear him online.
How's that?
Better?
Yes, that's good. Thanks.
So with that in mind, just to let you know the amount of calls that we handled for that 30-day period in the Northeast, North and Southwest, we kind of slacked. Needed 4 more calls to reach 15,000 in that 30-day period. So officers were really moving during that 30-day period. So actual number was 14,996 within those 3 districts. The CAC, we did a little under 1,600, 1,596 to be accurate. So that was about 10% of the call volume right here. So breaking down those calls for service in the district, Southwest did 5,131, North did 5,058, and Northeast trailed at 4,797. So they were busy all around. Top 5 calls for service, traffic stops. We did 247 in your CAC boundaries. We responded to 130 alarm calls. Motor vehicle crashes. There were 96 of those. 15 were injury involved. 911 hangups, 92. If you do call 911 by accident, all I ask is please stay on the line and let the operator call and say it was just a misdial. We can clear those calls out without having to dispatch an officer. And then security checks, people asking us to check on their properties and businesses was 53. So out of all those calls for service, 189 reports were generated. Miscellaneous, those are just we need something documented. That was 47, 22 assault reports. Larceny and drug violations was 17. Majority of those drug violations came from vehicle stops. Vandalisms and assaults, those are kind of tied into domestics. So those are sitting at 14. And then larceny from motor vehicles, the plague of Raleigh was 13. Please, please, please encourage your neighbors at 9 o'clock to check your locks. As far as crime patterns, I ask you if you leave like a shopping center or you're leaving someplace where you're like a bank, be mindful of your surroundings, be mindful if anybody's following you. There's only been one case that I know of in the North District where somebody was followed home and they had their car broken in because they had high value items in there. But it is a national trend for people to be followed home than being robbed or much worse. So just, before you pull in your driveway, check for headlights, check for any suspicious vehicles. And you see something, you're in the car, you get mobile and call 911. Captain Manukas, you have anything you want to add?
Excuse me. We are in the colder seasons, so what we tend to see, one of the trends that we tend to see, not just in Raleigh, but around the area, is people that warm their cars up. When I go outside, I'm gonna turn my car on, I'm gonna leave it running, and when you come out and it's gone, it happens a lot. You'd be surprised how many times we respond to calls, especially when it was 19 degrees out in the morning, and somebody goes and turns their car off, walks inside, gets in the shower, thinks it's gonna sit there for 30 minutes, and when they come back, it's no longer there. So make sure if you're, keep an eye on your car. Most likely don't turn it on and leave it, because that's where we get a lot of cars that get
Bad for
stolen.
the environment.
It is bad for the environment. Yeah, get a new car. I think that's bad for electric now, I don't know. So just be mindful. Bikes.
Thank you, Councilor Harris.
They get stolen too, though, because we leave them lying around. So just be mindful of your surroundings. In order for us to do our job, we can't do it ourselves. We need help from the community as well. The biggest trend that we're having is those with Kias and Hyundais. They're getting broken into and stolen because there's a YouTube video that shows you how to actually remove the center console, stick a USB drive in there, and it starts the car. So if you drive a Honda or Kia, please contact your dealership and see if your car is one of those that it may have an issue with, so that we can get that fixed. With that being said, just keep mindful of your surroundings. It is that time of year. Sometimes we see a lot more as it gets colder for some reason. They're out and about, so. It's really,
The department's still giving out wheel locks.
yep, we have the old style clubs for those. Most people in this room probably know what that is, but a lot of the conversations I have, they've never heard of, but it's the club that goes across your steering wheel. So if you have a Hyundai or Kia that falls into that year and possibility, that we will give you a club to lock until you can get it fixed. So just reach out to your local district and we'll get it taken care of. Questions? Anything else for us? Anybody online?
Anybody online? I think you're good. You got off easy tonight.
Yeah.
By the way, there's cookies and coffee.
David, do you have a question?
I know, here.
That was before you turned the mic.
Oh, thank goodness. Okay. So as I said earlier, I'm gonna really just turn the meeting over to the counselors. Is the echo bothering anybody? It's driving me crazy, but is it bothering anybody else? Guess well, that's what we did before, and then they couldn't hear me.
I think if you're not
Right.
Well, like turn your volume.
I'm not gonna play with it. We'll live with it. Okay. All right. So, counselors, how would you like to present tonight?
Jonathan's gonna advance.
I see Jonathan without a tie. I didn't recognize him.
I have no tie and a hat on. Well, last couple times I've talked at CAC meetings was with another council member, and we just stood at the front together and took questions, but if we want us to go one by one, that's fine. There's not more than 4 or 5 of us here, so we can operate in a group.
Right.
So it's whatever you'd like to do.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see Christina coming online, and Mary was supposed to be here, so I think you guys are okay to do pretty much whatever you want to do. We could just have an open discussion, which would be terrific.
I, did not know you asked us to send things in advance, so I did not.
No, I didn't ask
Okay,
you.
right, and then I'm also just better off, I much prefer like question and answer, like two-way exchange, so I'm happy to do that. Unless you guys want to do
Maybe
something.
we could all poke around and then.
Yeah, you don't even have to,
Q&As.
you don't even have to do that. We'll get you some chairs.
Just sit up right here.
One of you can take my seat by the computer. That way I know everybody else here.
Okay, we got it.
Okay. You guys are comfy?
Yeah.
And I know the computer can hear you, so
Okay.
we're good. And we'll fix you so you're on camera here. That's better. That's better. All right. Well, welcome to our humble abode. This is Eastgate Community Center.
This is my first time.
It's probably the first time for both of you.
I have been to the park, but I haven't been in the community center.
Right. This community center was redesigned. We had a grant of $600,000 for our park. We're probably the cheapest redesigned and redeveloped park in the city. But what it was mostly into was redesigning the, correct me if I'm wrong, Linda, but redesigning the community center for handicap access. And obviously we have better acoustics now, modern lighting. It's far better than it was before.
So it's an ADA renovation for this Powell Drive and Rock Campbell, I believe. And they combined them with the $600,000 that was part of one of the previous bonds, and then added some additional parks fund money with that. And then we were able to do some additional upgrades with that in addition to the ADA upgrades.
Right.
So it made the bathrooms more accessible, completely redid the interior. So the exterior is basically the same, it's just paint. The interior, they pretty much got it down to the studs, and then we had the ceiling used to go all the way up. You can see from the outside, kind of the shape of the roof. That's what it used to be. And our acoustics in here are significantly better. But it was renovated during COVID, so we're finally getting to use it.
Yeah.
Maybe back to its.
Yep. We are very happy. It's nice, comfortable, and warm. All right, so with that, whichever one of you would like to start is fine.
I can just start with a few remarks about things going on at council. Councilmember Patton was the chair of our retreat committee, and we are going to have our council retreat this weekend. So coming up Friday and Saturday, folks can join us if they like on Friday at the Cary Soccer Park, and Saturday in 5 Points at the adult.
5 Point Center for Active Adults.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yes, yes. And I know we are going to have some discussion around community engagement and CACs. So we've been in discussion, I think all of us with various CAC leaders recently about needs and how do we evolve these groups ongoing. There's still a number of groups across the city that don't operate. And personally, I want to see more groups like this get together. I want to see the next generation of leaders get involved. I helped to restart the West Raleigh CAC. So those are the ones, that's the group that I go to in my area. I know Bob is very active as a leader in the Southwest group. And so I'm just impressed to see you all continuing, taking this on and informing neighbors and keeping folks engaged. That's really important to me. I will also mention, you're supposed to have a transportation bond this year. That's something just to keep kind of in your minds. We're going to have a meeting for District D to talk about transportation, infrastructure improvements needed in February. So that's at our next District D Neighborhood Alliance meetings. We have those the third Saturday of every month. So I'm really looking forward to that. I feel like that's just ongoing, something we all have to be thinking about. Beyond that, it's winter. I'm looking forward to spring. I don't know why, it just feels colder this year than last year.
What are your expectations for this coming year?
On council. Well, we have a lot of rezoning cases in District D. I will say that, when I look at the numbers, we have more in Southwest Raleigh, which includes the western half of downtown than any other district in the city. So that is something that I am always really staying abreast of. What are the, kind of plans that, property owners want to have, and then how do we make sure that there are public benefits and that it's in alignment, with our neighborhoods and with our needs in the city. One example that goes beyond rezoning cases, we're actually going to have a committee meeting tomorrow on growth and natural resources. So I chaired GNR, and we're going to talk about the downtown transition zones. So these are basically the edge areas between downtown and many neighborhoods. And something that I learned recently, which I think will come up in tomorrow's meeting at GNR, is that the Hillsborough Wade CAC was basically the initiator of wanting these downtown transition zones, and they helped create them for Forest Park, and then other CACs and neighborhoods jumped on. So like the Central CAC on the east side of Raleigh, on the east side of downtown, then said, hey, we need some buffers as well. And so we're gonna have a discussion about the history of that tomorrow, as well as, potential opportunities to add more delineation around neighborhoods and thinking about what do those transitions look like. So there was actually a resident petition, an amendment that's been proposed to add a transition zone near the Glenwood Brooklyn neighborhood. So that's something we will take up tomorrow.
And what is the need for that transition?
I think the idea is that they don't have any kind of edge zone mapped in the comprehensive plan, whereas other neighborhoods do. And so they're requesting one. So not all neighborhoods around downtown have the same kind of like buffer transition. So that's the request.
What would that mean to
It's
Midtown?
It's an update to a guidance document, just to clarify,
Okay.
it's not a regulatory requirement. It's a guidance document, and it would just kind of suggest that if you're gonna build in that area, you would want to take into account certain considerations, consider certain heights and setbacks and some of those types of things.
Does this differ from, say, a 2-story home having a 20-story home right next to it?
I think it gives guidance about those like setbacks and like the step being up between an area. It doesn't say definitively it's got to be this height or this number of stories. It also has some guidance on uses. So like no, bars, kind of like nightlife activity next to maybe a residential neighborhood.
I shouldn't ask questions. I should let you guys finish and then.
Yeah, but I don't have any particular, I guess, grand vision that I plan to talk about for the year here. I think, in terms of my focus on council, it really has been consistent. It's all about community engagement, environmental stewardship, and affordable housing. And I think this council really thought a lot about affordable housing, whether that's preserving land that the city owns to build new housing, looking for repair opportunities. So if you're in a house, maybe, if you're a senior or you're on fixed income and you need a roof replaced, we have opportunities for that. We have eviction prevention services that we fund. And so we are planning to have an affordable housing summit in August, and I'm looking forward to having lots of folks there. Whether that's from government to people who are directly impacted by the housing crisis, developers, it could be nonprofit housing developers, private developers. I just think on every level have to double down our commitment to affordable housing in the city and truly across the US. So I'm looking forward to having a wider conversation about what that looks like and what we need to do.
I would love at some point if you would talk a little bit more, if you're interested in natural resources, and what's going on with our water table and also the water runoff issues that are coming along with the infill that's happening around the city.
Yeah, so in the Growth and Natural Resources Committee, we actually just approved, or we recommended a series of changes And then council approved those to be undertaken at our last meeting. Many of them related to green stormwater infrastructure. So in all new city developments, GSI, green stormwater infrastructure, is going to be assessed for feasibility. In many of the cases, rezoning cases that I look at, that are, for example, the Walnut Creek watershed, where there's a lot of flooding, downstream issues, I make sure, okay, can we add in GSI to this? Maybe we need permeable pavement, maybe we need, a stormwater pond that, has native plants, so it's gonna, just slow that water that trickles down. So I think that's an issue across the city. And I'm really proud of our stormwater team. One of the, investment opportunities that they're looking to make, and I think this council will support, is a permanent team to maintain all of our stormwater, control measures, so the various devices, because if you don't maintain it, it doesn't work. I know there's one right now, in my district, I think it's at JC Park that, needs to be repaired. And so anytime these get installed, we've got to have people that are dedicated to looking at that. My day job is at NC State. I'm faculty in the College of Natural Resources, work for the North Carolina Sea Grant Program, which is a NOAA program, and we do a lot of work on stormwater and resilient infrastructure. So yeah, very important.
Thank you. A couple things to build on that. One thing I know our stormwater staff is working hard on is educating folks on when they have private stormwater pipes on their property, because it's difficult to know, and you might not have been told that if you bought your home. It's totally possible. No one said like, this one's your responsibility, and so that's not always clear. But they're also bringing to us an update to what they call the Stormwater Design Manual, which is sort of the regulatory guidebook that says like, this is how big it has to be when you're going to have this much runoff and all of that. And so it will modernize some of the requirements that we've had and hopefully account for some of the, I know for sure I've brought to them some constituent service concerns and been like, what policy update helps us prevent this from happening to another resident? And so they're going to be bringing that before us in the next month or two. Next.
I don't have.
What's
to
going on
trying
in the
to
year?
think about what you haven't touched on. Well, first of all, I see a couple of Wolfpack logos in here, so not to alienate anyone in the crowd, but go Pack. So I do hope that men or women's basketball will win something this year. I think we've a good shot at the women's team winning the ACC. So obviously we're starting the budget cycle, and so we'll get the updates from the budget survey, and then we'll start having our budget work sessions soon. We're doing something a little different this year. We are implementing some participatory budgeting. So every council district was allocated $200,000 for an aggregate of $1 million, which compared to the total City of Raleigh budget is not a lot of money, but obviously $1 million is a good bit of money. And that's something other cities have done for a while, that we have a new budget and finance director now who was very receptive to trying things a new way. So that's going to be money that the public will directly be, I guess, voting on what those priorities are. So I think that'll be exciting. What else do we have coming up?
We're doing engagement around the alternative.
Oh,
crisis.
that's right. Yeah. And so I think one big priority obviously has been public safety, and then taking care of our workforce, both police, fire, emergency communications, everybody in Raleigh water and solid waste services. We've been able to get, I think, some benefits through for the fire department that they didn't have before with regarding education pay. We're working on some other things there. Obviously making sure that we can continue to recruit, retain officers is super important. That's been a trend not citywide, nationwide. There's been some sort of shift post-COVID where we've seen an increase in crime and just sort of this behavior that we weren't seeing before. Something else that we are working on is, I think we need a well-funded, supported, and well-trained police department to deal with issues of public safety. I also think we often ask our officers to deal with issues that they're either not best equipped to handle or they shouldn't be handling. And so looking at some alternative response units, we're getting that program finally stood up. We got permission from the General Assembly to send like civilian non-sworn officers to some minor traffic infractions. So I think some of those calls for service where there's not an injury or a theft or a public safety issue, maybe, I don't know, maybe someone's car doesn't start or they back into a hole or something, that can free up some space. And then, you know, calls for dealing with folks who are dealing with like a mental health issue or housing insecurity issue, getting some social workers that can help respond to those calls so that we can, you know, have our officers more readily available for, you know, the dangerous and high profile type work. And so I think that's going to be important. Durham started that process a little earlier than we did with their Durham Park program. And we're looking to either replicate it or create something similar for Raleigh. And that's out for engagement right now too. So you could go online and give your feedback on that right now. And I know the manager's office is also working with some local advocacy groups that have been talking about it. So I think that's really important. And we've got some really good climate action plan, community climate action plan action items that we're working on. We have the action plan and now the staff's bringing us pieces that we can work on. So 3 that are out right now for engagement that you can comment on are limiting drive-throughs in certain parts of the city. It's gonna be mostly downtown and areas where they don't quite frankly make much sense anyway. I think they're trimming it to where it's anything that has like what is it, urban frontage. So basically like downtown, not allowing new drive-throughs to be built there. Requiring electric vehicle charging in new multifamily development. So like a lot of what's being built around here right now, there's no requirement for like bike parking or electric vehicle charging or parking. So making that being part of our development code. And then the third one that I'm really excited about is when a new project goes in, they're not always required to complete a street grid. Sometimes it doesn't meet that threshold, but still requiring new developments to at least do pedestrian connections. So if you think about, if you look at a map, sometimes you'll see like a shopping center, maybe it's a Harris Teeter or something, and there are houses all around the shopping center, but there's no way to get from the house to the center without getting in your car, driving all the way around, maybe even a mile sometimes, parking. And if in the code there had been required to be a pedestrian connection, you could have walked from, you know, a sidewalk from that street over to the center. So just trying to chip away at the need for cars as much as we can. Councilmember Harrison and I often try to get around without our car. I did drive here tonight.
It would have been.
They've been asking about, I say it's too far, it was a little too far and it's cold and dark, but you know, I don't use it all the time and I'm fortunate for that. And I know Councilmember Harrison has an e-bike and uses that to replace a portion of her car trips. And we're actually getting ready to launch an e-bike incentive program, which some other cities have done first. And we're finally doing it in Raleigh. It is entirely funded, not through tax dollars. It is a federal grant. And it's going to be available to both low-income residents, and then there'll be a certain amount for everyone who can apply for the incentive, just the amount's a little bit less. And hopefully we can get some more e-bikes up and out in the street. And the really good thing about that program is it's not a rebate base. You don't go pay for it and then ask for money back. You'll apply, you qualify, you go to, it's at point of sale. So that does 2 things. 1, you're not coming out of pocket, and 2, is keeping the money in our local economy, because there will be local bike shops that the city is partnered with where you go there and you just, I guess, give them your code or something and voucher they put it in the register. So they're getting the benefit of the grant money, and you're not having to come out of pocket and then get reimbursed. So I guess I have more. What I leave for you, I don't know.
Do you have any resolutions for the, you have anything that you expect for 2024?
That's where the Wolfpack came in. I hope that they will win I want to see an ACC championship. And for the men, I hope they make the tournament. And for the city, I mean, we've just got a lot of good stuff going. It's been a really great term. Really enjoyed working with both of the council members I'm sitting with here. I just really proud of what we've been able to do this year and what we've got ahead. And my first term obviously was started in 2019. Most of it was during COVID. I was alone in my house in front of a video screen most of the time, and I've been really trying to get out in the community more, and that's been great. And the work we've been able to accomplish together has been great. And so I I don't have anything specific for this year, other than I just feel like the horizon's very bright, so,
Well, you're welcome here anytime.
thank you.
Larry, there are questions.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh,
March is asking, if you can explain the spending funds to build a new city hall, when we can't pay public safety folks enough to keep and recruit new officers.
Well, a couple things, and I can take this one. First of all, the process of building a new city hall started way before any of us were sitting in the city council. I think it's been going on 10+ years now. There is a difference between a one-time capital expense and then an ongoing personnel expense. So obviously, budgeting a one-time expense to construct a building is much different than ongoing salary and benefits and all those things that come with taking care of our people. And then the city hall building is actually going to save the city money in the long run. Right now, we are spread out amongst multiple buildings downtown. We rent some of them, we own some of them. I actually didn't even realize the specifics of this, but I was reading a news story recently that, and this must predate my time, but staff did an analysis about the amount of money it's gonna require over the next 5-10 years just to upkeep our existing aging buildings. And then obviously rent, and some of them are not ADA compliant. So the idea was to consolidate into one facility, increase customer service, increase efficiencies, because all staff will be in one place. The building will be big enough for us to grow into. It's gonna have a few empty floors. And then we can stop paying rent elsewhere, and we can divest of the aging properties that we have scattered, and that money can also be put back in. But I think the long, short answer is there is definitely a difference between a one-time capital expense to construct a building and then the ongoing revenue needed to pay and recruit and train, which we are also focusing on.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, that there was significant financial analysis done.
Yes.
To ensure that building the civic campus, makes sense. I think about it, with my own house, I have a mortgage. I have to, sometimes replace the roof, put in a new HVAC system. Luckily my house is, not that old, so I don't need to do a ton. But any of our infrastructure over time, it requires significant, repairs ongoing. We have so many different buildings that if we can consolidate into a new structure, it does appear from the financial analysis, that's going to be better ongoing. But also, we do need to pay our essential workers, our public safety personnel, a wage that's competitive in the region and in the state. We have a lot of vacancies across the city, and it's not, different from other places necessarily, but I want Raleigh to lead. I want when you call 911 that, folks can answer, that they have the capacity and the bandwidth, and they're like, yes, I'm available for you right now. I've seen these guys in action. I've been out in the middle of the night wearing my bulletproof vest on Glenwood South. We have a lot to do to keep certain areas of town just, safe on the regular. And so when someone has an issue that just comes up, we want you to be able to call. We had a 5% increase of salaries of all of our staff last year. But that is, it's small potatoes. In working for NC State, I'm a state employee. I see the very low increases that we get year after year, and it affects retention with time. A lot of our state departments have high vacancy rates, and so if we don't pay, our essential workers in government, again, a competitive wage in this region, there's other places you can go. So, I've let the city manager know that that's something that I support in this budget. It's increasing those wages, and so I look forward to seeing, improvements made there.
Yeah, and then I would add on the public safety thing as well too, is it does seem as though, anytime Raleigh raises pay, which last time we did, I think the manager proposed the Wake County average plus like 5 or 6%. Then one of the smaller towns will just raise pay, and we get into this sort of arms race, so to speak. Whereas when we raise, they raise, and then they pull, our officers and firefighters from us. And so I'm interested in continuing to increase the pay and finding other incentives that make it attractive to stay in Raleigh, including things that maybe a bigger city like Raleigh can provide that a smaller town can. And I will say we have a fantastic police chief. I think she's very responsive to the needs of the officers. She meets with us and tells us what they need. There's also some great, representatives that speak on behalf of police and fire that I know we all meet with regularly. And, I'm committed to doing what needs to be done.
We're having a case study as well
Yeah.
completed to help us look across the country about how to stay competitive. And I don't want to put you all on the spot, but I don't know if our officers here want to add anything from your perspective. I know there is a group that provides, direct, just a perspective from public safety to our city manager's office. I know
Yeah,
that
Jane,
might not be your role.
Yeah, Jane, I'm glad you asked them since they're both staying here for the meeting. Captain, Officer Winkler, is there anything you guys want to add? We talked about alternate police responses and developing some kind of program as an alternate to police response. I've spoken to EMS and I've always gotten the feeling back from EMS that the ones that work for the county don't want to go into Durham when they have a call in Durham. They've had a number of incidents, and I just want to know, if either one of you want to address any particular item.
So first, I'm not gonna address the question about pay. I think everybody that, if you went to anybody's job and said, hey, you wanna make more money?
Yeah.
It'd probably be yes. One, sometimes I open my mouth, that's their foot, so we're not even gonna open up. But to answer your question about alternate responses, how about that? We look at different things, and you guys mentioned it when we're looking at the needs of the citizens, especially now we're dealing with a lot of the homeless population and some mental illness, so we're working through that. You brought up a great point about civilian people being able to take wrecks or accidents or accident investigators. So that's going to help utilize different resources. And we look at things every day of how to reduce the response times for officers. We're never going to reduce the calls to 911. I don't think we can ever reduce the overall number of people that call 911, but how do we respond to them? Can we look at things from a different perspective? Because you're right, staffing in law enforcement is down. It's not just Raleigh, it's around the nation, it's a national trend since COVID. So how do we respond to calls in a different way? And those are things that we research every day. Is it easier to, we have a group of officers that just works in the office that's able to pick up the phone and basically telecall. So if you call for just to talk to an officer, they can answer that question. So we're not dispatching an officer out to them. So we're looking at different ways of changing the way we answer calls. Can I handle it over the phone? And I know a lot of times this is a pretty face, it's no moneymaker, but you don't always have to see it. Sometimes it's easier to just pick up the phone and handle your needs in 5 minutes as opposed to waiting 35 minutes or 45 minutes, depending on the priority of the call. So we do look at that, especially in the district that I work in, because I've proposed something to the chief numerous times on how we can reduce some calls. Because there's a lot of things that we used to do 24 years ago when I started, it's not a police need anymore. So let's find a different way to do it, to give the people what they need in a quicker way and reduce the response to face-to-face interaction with the police. So that we can be available for when something major happens and we're not worried about, hey, I'm pushing the car out of the road and then there's a shooting. Now I'm available to deal with the higher crimes that are out there, and we have assistance helping us with other things. So yes, we look at that every day. And then we look at different ways of doing it. So you guys have seen some things that come across. And sometimes we say things and, hey, this sounds like a great idea. And you're like, you get that look, and I get it a lot. But if you never ask, you're never going to find different ways. So you guys, I'm open. My door is always open. My phone's always on. If there's an idea, I'm willing to try anything. You probably ask the chief that, and I've tried some things and it hasn't always worked. But if you don't try, you're never going to find out. But that's the biggest thing. How can we reduce the face-to-face interaction? How can I reduce the officer driving from point A to point B to interact with you when we can just pick up the phone and do the same thing in 5 minutes? It's less time that you have to wait for us and vice versa. So can we handle your problem without actually driving there and interacting? And those are the biggest things that we look at every day.
I had a faulty alarm go off 5:30 in the morning. By the time I shut my alarm off and called the alarm company, they had already dispatched called you guys. And I said, can you cancel the call? It's just a fault. It's not anything wrong. Unfortunately, you guys didn't come, which I'm glad of. I'm also glad I didn't get fined for it. So yeah, at least I know that there's something on your end that's not just sending people out. There's some kind of response delay.
Yeah, so like when you call 911, it goes to the dispatch center, they prioritize the calls, and then they, based on the district and the priority of the calls, depends on how quickly your response time is. So the supervisor, like when I'll leave here, I'll be on the computer, I'll look at all the calls that are pending in my district, for example, because, sorry, all the other district managers, that's all I care about. I care about y'all in North Raleigh. So I'll look at the calls that are pending, and if I can actually handle anything on my way home, I'll pick up the phone, I'll call. I live up in the Wake Forest, so I drive the entire district, I'll handle calls on my way home, and guys, what are you doing? But if I can reduce that by just picking up the phone and calling somebody on my way home, why not? It meets everybody's needs. But it's a slippery slope also, because I don't want everybody calling for everything. There's that give and take, so.
So you're doing that hands-free.
Yes, they do give me a hand-free car. If I had an e-bike, it's a little cold today, and I do have a problem. I will pilot anything. It's a little long drive from Wake Forest when it's 19 degrees. But for y'all,
Let's try it.
You guys want to take some more questions? or
Yeah.
you want-
There's
Do you want to-
a couple in person too.
Okay, we have one from Whitney Hill. Affordable housing is great, but we simply do not have enough places to live, so supply and demand is pushing people onto the street. What are we doing to catch up, and when are we projecting to catch up?
Can I take that one?
Sure.
Because I think this gets confused a lot. We need more housing supply. The more housing supply we have, that is going to help incrementally reduce or stabilize costs over time. But we cannot focus only on the supply side, because there are folks that the market's never going to provide housing for. And so I think it's supply and subsidy. And a lot of times when we talk about housing, folks either only focus on affordable housing, which requires some subsidy, or supply. And I think it has to be a mix of both. And I do think that we have worked very hard to try to accomplish both of those goals, to making it easier to build more types of housing, and working with our nonprofit providers to get more subsidized housing, either through public-private partnerships or land banking or long-term land leases. One thing that we're doing right now that we didn't do for a long time, I don't know why, but the city owns a ton of land, empty land. Some of it's really big pieces, some of it's 1 or 2 lots here and there, and it just sat there for a long time. And now we're either, our real estate department is actually analyzing, is this a parcel that financially we could build affordable housing on? And if not, then let's just sell it, maximize the profits, and put the profits in our affordable housing fund. Most of it we're doing, let's get actual affordable housing on it, and we're doing it through long-term land leases. And so groups like Southeast Raleigh Promise are taking really good advantage of that. I think the past several times we've had something on our agenda, it's been nonprofit providers like CASA or Southeast Raleigh Promise or Habitat that have been able to get the land so that they can build the affordable housing on it. But on the supply side, I agree with you. Most people, and I heard Matt Clobber on the county commission talk about this years ago, and he really explained it well. Most people moving to Raleigh do not need affordable housing. They need housing that is affordable to them. So that means finding something at the right price point and enough of it available that you're not getting outbid by your neighbor or the person moving in from out of town. And then there are also people in Raleigh that need affordable housing. And they're not just people who don't have jobs. Some folks are housing insecure or unsheltered, and they need help getting into like stable, permanent housing. And then you've got folks that, you know, first responders and teachers that are working. It's just hard to break through to the next level. And that runs a spectrum too, from affordable rentals to long-term homeownership. And the city does have money available for first-time home buyer assistance. So that helps people access generational wealth. But I think it's important we talk about this issue. We can't just talk about supply, and we can't just talk about subsidy. We can't provide a subsidized housing unit for everybody in Raleigh, nor should we. But we do need to provide subsidy for the folks who need it. And then we need to work with getting as much supply as possible out there so that everyone else who wouldn't qualify for the subsidy is able to get housing. And we also hear a lot, you know, the federal government defines affordable housing as 80% area median income. Well, and with 80% area median income, you should not spend more than 30% of your take-home pay on rent. Well, in Raleigh, 80% area median income and 30% of your take-home pay is you should not be spending more than $1,600 a month on housing. The market should absolutely be producing rental units that are at least renting for $1,600 a month or less. They're not because we don't have enough. And so when you see all these apartment complexes and the rent for a studio is $2,000, it's because people are flooding here. And when our occupancy rate is in the 90% full, that's what's happening. If we get the supply up, that's gonna reduce the level where we need the subsidy, and we can put a lot more of the subsidy into like the 50, 60, 40, 30% AMI. Right now, we're having to supplement up to 80% AMI, and so the subsidy we have is not even going as far, and so it's like a compounding problem.
Yeah, and I'll also add to the when are we gonna catch up? I mean, we are in, I would say, a bad trend line. So if you
Yes.
look at homelessness rates across the country, you know, they are continuing to grow. That's what we are seeing in Raleigh as well. And I just sent my letter to President Biden. We saw President Biden on Thursday, and I had a letter that I wrote to him, but he didn't talk to me. He was like, he was nearby. I didn't get to give my letter.
Signature like you not him.
Yeah, so I put it in the mail. What I asked was, I see our federal commitments have got to double. You know, our state commitments have to double down. So federal commitments to housing vouchers through HUD, it can take 5 years to get a voucher, even though you're eligible in terms of the amount of money that you make. We need more money from the state low income housing tax credit program or finance program. That is how we build most of our affordable housing, where the subsidies come from. And so they only have so much in their coffers. And so, you know, again, this is like every level has to be focused on these issues, or we won't reverse the trend, certainly not alone with the city of Raleigh. And I don't know if Councilmember Patton, I think we've been jumping in a lot. Do you want to add some items here?
Yeah, I'll just,
Can I just stop you real quick?
okay.
I just don't want to let this one go by. In terms of housing affordability, we're looking into for Midtown, you know, that at one time when they proposed the expansion in North Hills, affordability was a big issue. And rather than commit to a 10% allocation of affordable houses, he just canceled the project. Now, there aren't many other people that even make a commitment that sizable. Most of the others are coming in at a much lower offer. But because there's no city policy guiding that along, that you'll kind of get, every time there's a rezoning, you'll get different offers. So with Shane's help, we've started to look into some of the other ways that people are doing affordable housing. And it so happens that the motel on Wake Forest Road that's being converted over to apartments is right in this area. Go ahead. You want, go ahead and add?
There's two. There's the extended stay. There are two different buyers. Extended stay is being converted to Vivo, right across from Raleigh, and then behind the building there's a Hyatt Park. And it was just went to auction, and that's being converted over to, it's being called flats. It's between 350 and 500 square feet. They're small, but they're between 1,000 and 1,300 per month for an apartment. I mean, that's feasible. That's under your 1,600. So it's market rate, but it's still affordable.
Yeah.
For people not making $70,000, $80,000.
I don't know what you're gonna say. I was just gonna add too, and I said the horizon's right earlier, but one bleak part about when we're gonna catch up is we got hit with like a double whammy too, because building costs spiked and now inflation's coming down, but interest rates are still really high. And a lot of these projects, talking on the supply side, they're not going forward because they can't pencil, or, you know, maybe the price of the house is coming down, but now your interest rate is so high that, you know, that's still putting your monthly payment. And so I don't know that we ever fully recovered from the Great Recession. And now that we're getting this post-COVID economic turmoil, I'm really concerned that our housing crisis is just going to get worse because it's just becoming financially difficult.
In Midtown, we're losing faster than we're gaining them. Every time there's a rezoning here, we have the potential, it hasn't happened yet, but the potential is there that when it's redeveloped with the current rezoning, the affordability could be gone, and there's nothing to protect that. So we try to, every time there's a case that comes up in Midtown, at least I and several others, try to make sure that the new developer is aware that he has affordability and try to maintain some aspect of it. Steve?
First of all, hey, I gotta agree with what you just said. One representation I heard of it, it's the difference between big A affordable housing, and little A
Yes.
affordable housing. So thanks for that. Totally different subject. Transit overlay district. New Bern, obviously a hot button right now. But one of the reasons is you're sort of gonna establish a precedent here because BRT is gonna happen in 3 other directions. Which we know brings development. And that's the whole reason. The reason you do BRT or you do BRT is because that's where people are transiting. The New Bern corridor is one of the highest transit corridors in the city, so that's great. But any thoughts as you're going into that you're hearing coming in next week or so?
Yeah, so for those who don't know, there will be a public hearing about the transit overlay district on the New Bern Avenue corridor next Tuesday, January 30th at 7 PM in the council chambers. So we invite you to come and join in on that. We'll get a staff presentation. We'll treat it, if you've ever watched a rezoning case or joined us for one, we'll treat it like kind of be formatted much the same way. We'll get a big staff presentation and then there will be an hour dedicated to each side. I suspect this will be an ongoing conversation, but that's what we're sort of opening up with. So invite you to join us next Tuesday. I think the TOD on New Bern is like an incredibly complex package of legislation that's being proposed. So I've been trying to kind of extract it into different buckets to add some clarity. So there's the comprehensive plan amendment. It's this station area plan, and that's going to have all sorts of guidance on where stations should go, where public art should go, where like historical markers should go, what kinds of plans and programming should be in place. So that's an update to our guidance document, the comprehensive plan. And then there's the TOD rules, right? That's an overlay that actually already exists on our southern corridor and our western corridor. And it's like a layer of tracing paper of additional rules applied to the parcels where it's tagged on. And then there's a component where that's considering increasing the entitlement on its 744 parcels across the corridor. And so some are 3, right, like zoned for 3 stories right now and can being contemplated to go to 5. Some are 5 already and being contemplated to go to 7. There's, like I said, 744 parcels with each one with like a different proposed change. And so I've kind of been thinking about that as its own bucket. And I think that's, for me, that's like the story we need to tell, right? So I think I've maybe talked around your question.
No.
We know that the 15 is already one of the most high frequency lines in the city, which is already running along New Bern Avenue. That's why it makes sense to put premier bus service there. Like, we've already using it. They're showing us they want to move from places on the corridor into downtown and back again. We've got, Wake Med, we've got job centers, we've got housing. There's all sorts of good stuff already on the corridor. So it makes sense to put premier transit there. But also making sure we get it right as we balance, welcoming new folks onto the corridor and adding housing that serves people who might live there but need to kind of move over a block so they can stretch out, while also not displacing the residents who are there, who have already been experiencing the development pressures that have been happening on the corridor for the past decade. So.
Yeah, I would just add, I think the way you described it was really great because I think everything's getting lumped together. And for me, one key piece that seems to be lost in this discussion, everyone's really focusing on what can be built with the rezoning. But folks aren't really talking about what does the TOD prohibit from being built. And I think that's almost the most important piece. Because when the transit overlay district is mapped, separate from anything that'll happen with any rezoning of an individual parcel, it prohibits surface parking lots and strip malls and drive-throughs and
Car mechanics.
car dealership, anything that is like not transit supportive development. The point is it should be all transit supportive development in that area. And I look at other corridors where we know bus rapid transit will be constructed in the very near future, Western Boulevard, for example. There was a Kmart there right at 440. it sold to another developer for the transit overlay district was mapped, and the new developer is building a suburban style Harris Teeter. So it's gonna be a Harris Teeter, with a ton of surface parking in front of it and nothing else. And had the TOD been mapped there prior to that sale closing, they would not have been able to build that. And now, I remember when that sale closed, we got so many emails, it was before y'all joined council, people mad at us, how can we let this happen? We can't control what happens from private sale to private sale, the city tried to intervene, we tried to buy it, we tried to talk them out of it, nothing worked. But so that's a huge missed opportunity, and that Harris Teeter will probably be there for the next 20 or 30 or 40 years, and so now an area that should have had housing on it and employment and retail is gonna have a ton of car storage. And so that piece, I think, is critical. The upzoning, as it's being called, I think we can take our time. I think we're gonna have the public hearing. I think we can look at where it makes sense for parcels to be included or not, whether we want to proceed with it at all at this time, whether we want to first beef up some of our other programs that can go in and be very prescriptive on helping with, displacement issues. But I think we have to get the comp plan and the transit overlay district itself done, because growth's coming to that corner. It's already happening. We got a whole staff presentation on this, regardless of the TOD, regardless of BRT under construction, that corridor growth's already happening. And the growth there is typically single family tear down for bigger single family. That's not going to produce any density we need for transit. It's certainly not providing more spaces for people to live, and it's pushing a lot of people out. So if we do nothing, we know that trend's going to continue. So I think at least the transit overlay district will help with an affordable housing density bonus, with making sure that there's retail and employment, and there's more housing for more people. The rest of it, I think we can work through. And that's I think where I'm at on that. And also the public hearings and special meetings was an hour per side, so it's not like the 8 minutes like normal people, so like normally we have. So if you'd like to weigh in, just come to the hearing and there'll be plenty of time.
And as like a sidebar, it's not directly related, but it's adjacent. The city has been really aggressive in acquiring property along the corridor, because we know the public is calling for, and we need to serve deeper affordability. So we've acquired the DMV site that's there on New Bern, and we've also acquired Zach's Grocery and a few parcels around that. And so and half of Duplex Village. And so we will be putting out RFPs so that those can be redeveloped with like intense affordability. And exactly what the community needs. We got a big presentation on the engagement process for the DMV site. So there's going to be cool activation of the site that will draw people to it. And we'll say, also, while you're here at this farmer's market, that's just an example, it's not a guarantee. But while you're here at this farmer's market, tell us what you envision here. And so we want to have this like comprehensive set of needs that we're meeting for the community, whether it's daycare or grocery or pharmacy, mental health care, whatever, in addition to housing on that campus.
Got a multi-part question. 6 Forks Road, since it has not been brought up, and Jonathan, I think I'm one of the houses that's supposed to be not. It's kind of a multi-part question. We're in year 12 on this project.
Yeah.
Year 6 since council approved it in 2018. The survey served no purpose, because mainly city staff will tell you they did not develop the survey properly. There was a lot of mistakes with the survey, so that didn't really provide any valid information to
The first one or the one we just
the
did?
one we just had.
Got it. Go ahead.
Question one, I've talked to city staff. One, have they talked to you about their projected plans on how they're tweaking the project? Have y'all been informed on that yet, or are you waiting until they present it to you? That's question one. Question two, what's it gonna take? I mean, it's like I said, you're holding almost 100 property owners hostage. I know this started long before y'all did. I knew I was gonna lose my house. Really, the original proposal said no dwellings would be taken, which all you had to do was measure the distance for the project, and knew that was not true. So I've known for 5 years I was gonna lose my house. That means 5 years I can't do anything about my house without, I've had more letters from lawyers than I've had from the city and real estate agents. So my biggest question is,
What's it gonna take for y'all to step up to the plate and make a decision, a final decision that's binding?
Yeah, so first of all, I have to say that this did start before our time. And I would say that the first time I feel like we got a lot of attention on it was just recently. And I don't even think I fully appreciated the impact it was having on business owners and property owners along the corridor. And quite frankly, I've been really sick to my stomach since you and I talked about this idea that you're just in limbo, and whatever decision is made needs to be made so that you have some clarity and certainty. And so I think that was a massive mistake by the city, letting it get this far. I'm frustrated, and I am frustrated often at the speed of which government moves. I don't understand why we have a plan. We take 4 or 5 years to develop a plan. We talk about the plan to death, and we study the plan. Then when it comes time to build the plan, we can't afford it. And then we talk about, well, what are we going to do? Because now we can't afford the plan. So it's like this weird cycle that needs to stop. And so we can't fix what happened with Six Forks Road. We don't have a time machine. Moving forward, we can't do it this way. We have to over budget projects from now on, and we have to build them with a much more nimble strategy. For Six Forks Road, they did give us a presentation with the survey results. We gave some feedback. The feedback ranged from, we don't like a lot of the options you gave us, but is there a way that, I'm a big bike and non-car infrastructure guy. If I had a magic wand, I think I would focus on the sidewalks and the crosswalks and the bike lanes and leave the street as it is, but that's clearly not what the community has asked for. They have asked for more lanes and being able to get more cars to move.
I was saying, have they talked to y'all about what they're planning so far? This is important.
Right, so basically the feedback we gave them was, yeah,
Getting some money from I think the roundabout at Revere, is that right, Larry?
Yeah, they're gonna kill that one, yeah, which was a bad idea.
Yeah.
So they're tweaking it to try to, less dirt that's gonna be needed to be purchased, money from another project. They're trying, I didn't know if they had talked to y'all about.
no, what we've talked to them about, what the feedback I gave, they paid me to say this. I was like, we need to cut the separated bike facilities and sidewalks. We can do a multi-use path, which we're doing along Newburn Avenue. That should trim some costs. And then we asked them to figure out how we can accomplish the goals.
That actually costs more money to do that.
We want to just do it, cut as much so we can get the meat of the project done, but we have not received an update recently.
Right.
Councilmember Harrison just mentioned that there may be a transportation bond. I quite frankly think we're gonna have to run another bond and make that priority 1 and get it funded and built from that.
So that's another year delay.
That I don't know, and I wish I had a better,
Bond can't come up before November.
that's right, and then
And
the
then
money
it
doesn't
comes
come in,
back in
it's,
July.
yeah, that's right.
So we're talking another 18 months.
Right.
But I would hope that we would at least have an answer of what's happening so that you can plan for it. Like, this is what we're approving.
But as long as my house is
Right.
and other houses and people go lose property, we can't plan it.
No, I
That's the
understand.
point I'm making.
In my recollection, we have about 40 million, 45 million. set
Yes.
aside.
Yes.
So if it's up to me, and I know I'm just 1 of 8 on council, is that we do the most we can with the money.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Because when I look at the transportation bonds of the past, we had a presentation about every bond that we've seen. All of these projects, so many of them they have not been completed, right? So few of them have been completed, and so I wouldn't want to put you all off another year or 2 years on another bond. We have money set aside for Six Forks, so I think we should do what we can based on what the community has asked for and move on.
That's what I say.
I can't imagine what you're having to deal with, in the community.
Staff, what they have told me, they want to cut 5.5 feet off each side.
Okay.
That's one way to save some dirt. Like I said, we're Revere, but that's Jonathan, the separate pathways are less expensive than the one pathway because of the layout of the light poles.
Yeah.
When you do one pathway, the light poles are further away from the street, so that includes more light.
Well, we gave them an alternate for that too.
But
When it's separate pathway and sidewalk, the light poles can go in between.
Right.
So the Duke right of way is not as wide from the center lane of the street.
Well, I like that better anyway, because it's for everyone. But I agree with Councilmember Harrison. We have not received an update recently, but we can certainly, when we leave this meeting, pay. And I agree with the money we have, $40 million we have, we just need to get it done that accomplishes as much of the community goal as possible with the money we have and not push it off any longer. And then in the future, this can never happen again, but it's happened for so many projects. Like it's frustrating.
Holly?
I bike every weekend on the trails through the city. The MS ride. I love biking. I live in North Hills. You could not pay me to bike in these streets in these areas. And there's no place to put the bikes.
Yes.
And in the summer it's hot as shit. And I don't understand what problem we are trying to solve with bike lanes in a 2-mile region that don't really go.
Right.
I love, I mean, you saw me, right? When you said e-bike subsidies, I was
Yeah.
like, oh, e-bike subsidies, right? But like, what are we trying to do with putting bike lanes on 6 points?
So,
They're not bike, it's a bike pathway 10 feet off the street. It's not a lane.
It's not on the street. It'll be separated facility.
Yeah.
But it's where we should go.
I bike on 6 works every day, twice a day, to and from work.
In the current situation.
In the current, I use the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Except for like 50 yards to get to the sidewalk. And the issue is like, I cut through all these neighborhoods, I go all the way up to the ramp. Each day, both ways.
You're brave, man.
Well, I go through all neighborhoods, right? 6 Forks is the busiest road I ride on. I cross, Spring Forest, I cross Millbrook, I cross, Durant Road, like all through neighborhoods. And the problem is they were designed so you couldn't get through them,
Yeah.
right?
That's the other thing we're talking about before you got here.
So you have to use some of these major streets for 100 yards or whatever to like zigzag, right? So I use the sidewalk. I go to food line, for going work to food line. Couple times a week. So I ride along the sidewalk. It's really unpleasant to ride, just so damn loud. Like you got 6 lanes of traffic, people going 45, 50 miles an hour. I can't imagine walking. You couldn't have a conversation, right? But like at some point you have to be able to use that even for a little bit, even if you're going a quarter mile or an eighth of a mile. You know, you got the school there, so that's part of the issue. It's like, yes, nobody's gonna ride along 6 Forks for a mile. But you need to be able to get across it, look at some little zigzags. So somebody, there's the retirement community there, Apple Havers. Somebody put in a thing right in the middle of the sidewalk, so people could sit by the bus stop.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't know who did that.
The little red bench.
Right.
Yeah.
Instead of clearing off the landscaping back to where the sidewalk actually is, way back here. They just left it, and now the bench is right in the middle. So it's like, you know, then.
Solve one problem, create another one.
Right, and then, you know, it's like, it looks nice, it's red, they're like, ooh, look at this, it's red.
But it's metal, so it's cold in the winter and it's hot in the summer.
And there's a perfectly good landscaping that people sit on.
Yeah.
That they can sit on, like.
If it truly is an impediment, we should get that looked at.
It can probably adjust it.
Yeah.
You know, like, so the sidewalks are super unpleasant, walking, riding, it's like, I am all for improving that. And the improvement is to reduce traffic.
Yes.
I would rather traffic was backed up and just not moving. That would help us out in the current situation, frankly. So, you know, I am pro whatever makes it a little more pleasant, whether it's a wider path or whatever. I don't think widening on the street is gonna make it more pleasant, even with a wider path, because then traffic just goes up and stuff.
No,
Well, the problem is simpler than that, though. The problem is that the lanes that currently exist are not consistent. Some are as narrow on the road as 8 feet. Now, you can imagine with some of the people that are not experienced drivers,
Buses.
or people that have buses, trucks, whatever, trying to go through an 8-foot lane, same problem on Wake Forest Road. So just to fix the lanes requires that the road be widened, and that's the starting point. So then, you knowing that the road has to be widened, what do you do next? And that's where the 6 Forks plan is done, it's ready to go, it's been ready to go for 12 years. So my only, I didn't want to bog you guys down with the 6 Forks road plan, but the clock is ticking.
No, I know.
One of the worst parts on 6 Forks is not even gonna be addressed, which is that around the interchange. And you're gonna have a project coming about very shortly for a rezoning to put more 20-story buildings and who knows what else right below the interchange with no way to get out onto the road, not even a traffic light to get out on that road. And you're just adding cars into an already congested area.
I'll add something to that, and I don't mean to make this conversation more complicated. But there is a lot of data that shows that actually, when an area becomes denser, you're capturing a lot of those trips internally and it reduces the need for cars. And so at some point, you're getting to a tipping point where if enough people can live near the things that they need and we make it safe for them to get the things that they need, they don't have to get in their car to get the things that they need. But that's kind of going through growing pains, and the way we measure traffic right now is still, it's not vehicle miles traveled, it's trip per day. And there are a lot of people that live arguably walking distance of that Harris Teeter right up here, or the Target right over there. But because it's not safe for them, they get in their cars and they contribute to traffic and they contribute to climate change and they drive over there. And so at some point, we have to be investing in the infrastructure and then also be building a mode switch. Because if people can walk to, maybe not everything, but like with Councilor Harrison's e-bike, she can use that for 2 of her 5 daily trips, and now suddenly her daily trips in her car are down to 3. And incrementally, that does have an effect, but it does not solve our problems in the short term.
I'll just tell you again, clock is ticking. St. Albans has 2 major developments that are gonna open probably within the year, either 1 year or 2 years away. That road is still a 2-lane road. It is the only connector going from Wake Forest to Sixth
That's how I
Floor.
see it.
And you're gonna sit there. You won't be able to get to the Harris Teeter walking. So I'm just telling you that that's why we have an area plan.
Yeah.
To alleviate a lot of this. That's probably the right thing for New Bern as well, is an area plan rather than taking shots at it the way we are. But I don't want to bog you guys down. I want to get to other things.
One last thing on Six Forks is that, and this is the reference to what you're talking about. No matter what we do on Six Forks, there are 100 properties affected, no matter what we do, right?
Yeah.
So I think one thing to think about is sort of flipping the priorities a bit here. You know, we had a survey out there with all bad choices. The fact is, no matter which one you took, except for the fact of just banning the whole thing, the 100 properties are affected.
Yes.
So maybe the priority needs to move up to say, okay, no matter what we do, these people are going to be affected. Can we take care of them first?
Yeah.
Right.
And then finally get to what we're going to do, you know, in terms of the improvements that should take place. Because the money actually may be there to do that now. But I just think we got to extract these citizens from limbo.
Yeah, no, I agree.
You know, move that up, because you actually have funding where you could be able to do that maybe, or a good part of it, and take care of that. And then we figure out, okay, what's the plan going to be? Because the problem is you got a conflict coming up, right? Because eventually you want BRT at Six Forks, right? Which means you got to do something else there.
I don't think they're clear on that yet, but let's not add that ball in.
Right?
Yeah, they're still studying where, once it gets to Capitol at the Gray Town station, they don't know where it's gonna go after that, but.
Come to our meeting next month.
Because we got, you know, like you said, we're gonna call that one.
Yeah, that's.
So, but the one thing we don't need to talk to death is the fact that we have a bunch of citizens who own property who are gonna be affected no matter what we do. So maybe we ought to fix that first and then move on. So maybe that's something to talk to staff.
Yeah, I like that.
Yes, Megan.
Oh, I was just gonna say that we have some questions in the chat too. I don't want to forget our virtual friends.
Oh,
but
I
just wanna
think
be on
we're,
this.
I think we're almost caught here.
The last thing, if you're disabled or older and still going to need a way not to walk to the nearest grocery store, I know. People come at me all the time on the internet about this. I do not believe that I'm going to eliminate cars. I have a car. My husband and I have a car. I drove it here. The point is if we give folks options, if you have a car, need a car, want a car, if we give folks options, then that's fewer cars on the road, less traffic for you and more available parking for you. I totally understand. I don't understand why bicycles and scooters, we suddenly say, if you have one, you have to do everything on it. We don't put that type of burden on any other form of getting around. Sometimes it makes sense to walk where you're going. Sometimes it makes sense to scooter bike where you're going. Sometimes it makes sense to drive where you're going. I want to make it safe to do all 3 of those things, because that'll be a positive for everyone.
Well, on the books, by the way, if we get the greenway finished, it's gonna come up from Big Branch Creek. And come up through this area, make it much easier for you to ride your bike. Also, if we get Atlantic Avenue finished, where the bike path runs along that avenue, and make your travel much easier, make your travel much easier. So I'm just saying is in the end, the bottom line is the city has to spend more money on infrastructure, which we have not done for 10 or 15 years.
But we did just approve the money for the bridge. Got all the money switched around for the Big Branch Greenway Bridge. Is that right? Am I right? You're looking at me with your face.
Well.
I'm
there-
pretty sure we did.
This gentleman's had his hand
Have a
up. I
separate
wanna make sure we.
discussion.
Go ahead.
That's Chad.
So I actually have just kind of three things. One with the requirement of the charging stations for cars. So like Durham, they've now kind of gone the route of electric school buses,
Yeah.
and they're having rolling blackouts. So at some point, those buses are not gonna run,
Oh, yeah.
can't charge. So if you're gonna require new builds to include those EV charging stations, how are you gonna source that electricity? So I think too many people think the electricity comes from rainbows.
Yeah, no,
It
it requires gas to make it, yeah.
How are you gonna
Yes.
source that? So that our seniors who live in the duplex or live in the small single home, they're not getting their power outage. While these larger developments are being favored because they paid the money, et cetera, et cetera. So is there a game plan for there? So that's one. Two, I really like the idea. I mean, e-bike, I don't want to ride the e-bike, but I would buy a golf cart. And I would take a little golf cart up and down the garden. Because you can put your groceries in it,
Yeah.
take your child in it.
2 people on a neighbor.
2 or 3 people, so I'm just saying, I don't know why.
There are
a bicycle.
beautiful golf cart
Yeah.
communities,
Yeah.
I've seen, yeah.
Well, it's just paving, and then the other thing, this is really important, because affordable housing, I hear a lot of city officials in lots of different cities all tout affordable housing. And I think even in Raleigh, don't we have an equitable housing thing where builders can actually buy their way out of providing
Yes.
the affordable housing? So to me,
There's
that's.
no requirement for affordable housing. We cannot require that by private.
Do we not have an
developers.
equity housing?
Yes,
We have an
yes.
affordable housing fund and sometimes folks will offer contributions. We just cannot.
They
We
can-
can't say we're gonna
Yes.
vote your case down if you don't give us money for the affordable housing.
But they can pay rather than build, yes.
They can pay instead of build, so. And it kind of taps into two things, and I like the property ownership generational wealth. I think I was just having this conversation with Whitney Hill the other day. That I see a lot of apartments and high density, but I don't see any path to ownership within
Yes.
those units.
Yes.
So I don't know if condos just became unpopular, or they just are, the forever renter is now kind of the concept. Because they can be subsidized by our local government, so why would you ever want to give up that money? So I just kind of, and if you look in downtown Overland where the new fire station is, those are all affordable houses and they're gone. Now they're gonna be ritzy apartments, once again, no ownership. Right, and so these people, they are being displaced, and I think that's why we're seeing more and more people on our sidewalks and at our intersections, even though we have affordable housing in the city council, we're still seeing people becoming more and more displaced. So that was a lot, but I waited all the way to the end, sorry.
No, I appreciate that. I've actually done a deep dive on the lack of condo. I've talked to a lot of folks in the financing and lending. After the Great Recession, they just became very difficult to finance. You're starting to see some condos or for sale apartments coming up, but they're very, very few. Most of what we're seeing that's multifamily, at least big multifamily, is rental. I don't know what will take to shift that, but I do know, at least in downtown, that the last condo building that was open was 2008, and then one opened in like 2019, and then there's a couple coming online now. So it's a long gap of banks just saying, we're not gonna give you money to buy condos, and I don't get it. But I'm not a bank.
And then the unfortunate thing we often say about nearly everything is we don't have the authority to regulate what's called tenure. So we don't have the authority to regulate whether something becomes for sale or for rent. So there is a big movement sort of in the larger industry nationwide to build for rent. I mean, even building single family homes with the intention of them being rental in perpetuity with or without public subsidy. It's a gravy train, right? People are not gonna not need a place to live. right? So, yeah, without the authority to
But
regulate.
it goes back to Councilor Harrison's point. We could do a lot more if the state government would let us. And if you could talk to your representatives in the legislature, there's a lot of stuff.
For both of them.
And I don't, not to get overly political, but depending on your voter registration, you know, one party's in charge down there, the other is not. And typically the folks that want to help us are in the party that is not in charge, and everything they propose dies in the final. And so if you have any sway over elected folks in the legislature, that can help.
Well, I guess even to tie into affordable housing, if you can use your zoning authority to dictate, you know, something there, why can you not zone for mixed use tenancy? Is that really?
We cannot require ownership or rentals at all. We can't say it must be for sale. It must be permitted. When a developer offers affordable housing contribution, it is voluntary. So, you know, we can have discussions about it, we can talk through it, we can vote for cases or not vote for cases, but we don't get to dictate those terms. And so that's really a state rule about our authority or lack of.
Chapel Hill has they have a mandatory, what's it called, I forget, blank.
Inclusionary though.
But they got a special, a local act through the legislature 20, 30 years ago, and I think they're the only ones that got it. Pardon? With having a poll, yes. Well, you know what, listen, I'm gonna speak freely here. That last state budget bill that came through, they pulled all local zoning authority from a recent town or city because they did something and someone in the General Assembly had property there they didn't like. So like,
They took away annexation powers in Leland. They took away our powers to institute our own UDO on state property within the Raleigh city limits. Like, it's tricky, but we do have carrots. We only have carrots and no sticks. That's the thing of local government. But so things like the transit overlay district, the TOD is like a piece of tracing paper with extra rules. One of them is an affordable housing density bonus. So if your property is has a zoning that allows you to build 3 stories, then you could actually, if you sort of trigger this carrot, if you reach for this carrot, then you can build up to 5 stories, so long as X amount of the units are affordable at, you know, at a certain level of affordability for a certain length of time. So we have lots of carrots, and I think we kind of, has become my mantra in the last year is like, local government's always around, like, you can't go from point A to point B very often. You've got to find your way to the kitchen door. Like, you've got to find a way to come around the side. So I think there's more ways we can brainstorm that we haven't thought of yet, but.
which is why serving local government, it's a frustrating place to solve.
And in terms of voluntary contributions of affordable housing that developers bring to the table, you know, I think it is up to the council to make it clear that that's our priority, that we want to see that. And so in every major case in District D, there is a contribution. It's either, you know, a financial contribution so that the city can use that money to build affordable housing, or it's for units on site. I know Councilmember Patton has been really successful with those contributions to District B. And so it's a little bit of a dance in terms of figuring out what numbers work, because ultimately we do want them to build the project. We don't want them to offer so much that then they say, actually, I can't afford it and I'm not moving forward, because then we won't have the housing involved. So we're finding that those kind of numbers.
I guess it's back here in Bell Hollow. You know, I think a string of homes were purchased. And then that little shopping strip gets to extend. But there's no replacing the homes, or there's no, you know, there's no apartment units coming on top or anything like that. And I think even space is not 100% capacity. So I guess those are things kind of blow my mind too, where we take shopping centers and we extend them, we take out the houses, you know, we don't even have capacity within the shopping strip. So we're driving the need for cars.
Yeah.
Right? Because we're not filling what we have, because we're too busy feeding the developers to where they can knock houses down. Build it. And then they subsidize their portfolio by 40% occupancy, 50% occupancy. So I think those are issues that the city absolutely could lean on their zoning and say, hey, we zoned it for this use, you're not using it. So, just, sorry, overstepping my bounds a little bit.
One thing that, in addition to what you mentioned about the banks, I was at a seminar recently where we talked about condos, and one of the issues that comes up is if you're a developer and you build a condo, once they're sold, you lose control. And so, you know, the incentive, there's a financial incentive there that changes. And that's, you know, that's one of the issues too, because then the control turns over to the owners. And there's all sorts of variables that can, you know, play. So that's, I mean, if you've ever owned a condo, you know what kind of.
You need a good condo board.
Yeah,
Just, there's also a good time in HOA.
yeah. I want to get back to Megan. I think we've interrupted a couple of times here and we never got around to letting Megan talk about what she sees for 2024, what her resolutions are, and just general comments. You've contributed a lot, but I'm gonna give you the floor for a couple minutes.
Oh, sure. I forgot whatever I had been thinking of at that time. No, I've spent a lot, you know, the New Year is a good time for reflection, and I've spent a lot of time over our winter holiday reflecting on what I was most proud of, and a couple things that I am super proud of to have done for the district. My focus on when we talk about getting public benefits through rezoning efforts, my big focus has been on building park capacity out in the edges of my district, and then getting building fire service capacity. So if you're not familiar with District B, it's just about as far out in the boonies as you can go and still be in Raleigh. It's all about past Durant, Wakefield area, catches Headingham, swings all of Capitol Boulevard and 540. So it's really far out there.
It used to be Brentwood. It used to be right.
You used to have Brentwood, not anymore. And so there are just challenges with fire service out there. There's a lot of space to cover. And so I've been really working hard on getting contributions that will help us grow our fire service coverage out there. And then I also got a developer to offer a voluntary contribution that will bring a park online that wasn't funded through the bond and would otherwise have probably been sitting stagnant for maybe would have gotten the next bond, might have been 2 bonds away, like another decade. So I'm really excited to activate a space that would otherwise have just been sitting there. Things that I'm looking ahead to, I'm really watching what's called the major investment study for the northern BRT line. So I guess this is not my territory, but so y'all will want BRT that gets you to North Hills, but I want BRT that gets us to Triangle Town Center. Right now, we're being told that's not an either or. There's a both and possibility. We just have to figure out how that could be true. So I'm hopeful that remains true, but
They'll be here next month
oh,
for that same question.
but the one line is one of the most frequented lines in the city. It currently runs from Triangle Town Center to downtown. I often park there at the park and ride into downtown myself. And so I think we've got a lot of Lifeline users, a lot of daily users on that line. And so it's really important to me that we get BRT all the way out there. So that's the thing I'm watching really closely in the year ahead. Another thing that I'm watching closely, or I'll be really eager to see come forward, Councilmember Melton talked about supply, subsidy, and then another piece is stabilization. And again, we're prevented from going from point A to point B on a lot of the initiatives we'd love to see. So we can't, in a super straightforward way, stabilize rents for renters. And we know that there's a lot of folks who find a place and they can afford it, but they need some predictability and stability in what that's going to look like, right? The beauty of home ownership is that your costs will go down theoretically, right? Your mortgage is going to get fixed and it's not going to become more over your life in the home. That's not true for our renters. So I've asked our staff, again, that topic of coming around the kitchen door, we can't go from point A to point B, but how can we come around the side? I've asked our staff to develop like a feasibility study on how we could produce incentives for stabilization and predictability and best practices of landlords so that they are interested and eager in, making it predictable and steady for our renters. So those are some things I've got my eye on in the year ahead, and follow me on social media, really active there. I do like little Saturday school. I just did one on property tax valuations, which if you own property, you probably just got your letter in the mail. You might be worried that your bill is gonna go up proportionally to, you're like, oh, my property value doubled, so my bill is automatically gonna double too, which isn't quite true. We'll be presented with a revenue neutral rate. So right now our rate's 43 cents per 100. We'll be presented with a rate that's some number lower. I imagine it'll be in the low 30s, but I wouldn't swear to it. And then the council will either adopt that or adopt some other rate, but that's a choice of the council. It's not. So I just want you to know there's still sort of another step in the process.
So buttering you up now.
What?
Buttering you up now.
I mean, email us.
Don't put this on.
Hey, I just gave him cookies and coffee. What more do you want?
You said they're gourmet. So
If I
said it gourmet.
There was one more question in the chat, which I was kind of saving for the end. It was from Marcia. And she was asking about any progress in making changes in the election process. Now, I did watch the last council meeting. I give Jonathan a lot of credit for, let's move on. Let's get this thing done once and for all. So I know that you guys are taking the election reform seriously, but I think maybe one of you ought to address it maybe quickly.
Well, it started during my first term. We've implemented some stuff, but I think the big lingering questions are moving to 4-year terms. Would the council be staggered? Would we not? If we did 4-year terms, would there be a primary or not? And then do we need to add council seats? I believe what I heard at the last meeting that we told staff that we would like to put on the ballot this fall, the issue of should the council move to 4-year terms or not? If we do 4-year terms, should there be a primary or not? Personally, if the council, I'm not gonna say we, because who knows who's gonna be there. If the council were to move to 4-year terms, I think we should have a primary. I think a primary is really difficult to do in a 2-year term because essentially you'll get elected and then you'll be running for office again very soon after. I will say though, that in Wake County, there are 12 municipalities. Every single municipality except Cary does plurality, no runoff. So the election we have in Raleigh where the top vote getter wins, that's what everybody else does except Cary. Even when Raleigh used to do runoff, there was very few runoffs ever in the city of Raleigh. Only one time ever, once since the 70s, did a runoff change the outcome of the election. So I understand the concern about top vote getter wins doesn't feel like it's right. I personally would support ranked choice voting. We've been talking legislature a lot right now. We're not allowed to do that. But anyway, what we have now is what everybody except Cary has. Cary still does the runoff. I don't know what it looks like there. But I would think that the 4-year staggered with the primary, that'll be on the ballot in the fall. I believe that's what we're going to be doing. So when you go vote this fall, one, you'll see a ballot initiative that asks that question. The other question was, should the council size expand? I think we all agree it needs to. We have not added council members since the 70s. Population has quadrupled since then. The issue is it seems like the public mostly supports adding district council members. To add district council members, we have to redistrict. We just redistricted 2 years ago. It's not a pleasant process. It's also very confusing for voters. We want it to be very open and transparent and fair. We want independent people drawing the maps. So the only way we could expand the size of council would be to start that process now or soon for it to be implemented for 26 or 28. So I believe what you'll see is this fall, when you go vote in November or early vote, there'll be an ask on the ballot. Do you think the council should move to 4-year term? Should they be staggered? Should there be a primary? You'll get to vote on that. And then I do not believe you'll see any council seats added for the next election or maybe 2 elections, because it will require drawing new maps. And we just went through a redistricting period, which delayed an election, which caused a lot of controversy or turmoil. It's just not fun. I personally don't want to sit through another redistricting, so I hope that we can.
I think that's the point of it. The last council and mayor gave themselves an extra year in office without any public input at all. So I think that's why people are very leery about allowing politicians to make decisions about elections. And we'd much rather see some kind of public forum, put it on the ballot. And just out of
It's gonna be on the ballot.
curiosity here, how many people would like to see those choices put on the ballot? Just raise your hand. How many are against? There you go.
And there's also, even to get something on the ballot, you back into it and there will be 2 public hearings. So
Okay.
you have those opportunities to engage
Yeah.
it too. And then of course our inbox.
What we asked staff to do was start that process so we can get it on the ballot in the fall, which is gonna require all this stuff to start as early as March.
Yeah.
So if you want 8 years.
It gives them an even years.
Is there gonna be a choice to go back off?
No, I think.
No. It's what's on there now.
Okay. Nobody voted on that.
I
Yeah,
think that would take a local bill.
what?
Let's say just, I think if I could.
I personally think for 5 years, but
Yeah, I think there's arguments in either way. Obviously, we saw. Gosh. Well, this will be the first presidential election year, but I mean, the turnout increased immensely on even years. So I think there's a difference between if you have a more representative electorate and then the even years. I think the argument is perhaps a more informed electorate because there's fewer issues. So I think it could have got either way. But I mean, I'll just say the legislature moved like 30 elections to even years last year, not just Raleigh, and they were all done the same way. So it's not, I mean, we live in Raleigh, we pay attention to Raleigh, but there's a trend to move everybody to even years. And they may on their own move us back. I don't know. They moved school board a bunch of times. They moved the county commissioners, I think, once, so.
my only word would be, don't let the mayor delay you more. You had the initiative, you've moved to get something done by March. I'd say keep that ball rolling so that we wind up on the ballot in.
Glad you could sense my frustration and urgency, but yes, we need to just pull the trigger on.
I took a quick vote for you.
Tired of talking. So I think you'll see that on the
That's why I
ballot.
saved it for last.
You'll see that on the ballot.
Really, there's too much control by our current mayor. We need more.
Well, we're not gonna get political.
We have a good working group, I think.
Tell you what, I was very impressed about the vision between the three of you tonight, being here together.
Yes.
You have more credibility, three of you are there, your full story, and what your true thinking is on these thoughts.
Yes, highly appreciated.
Good to be here.
Yes.
Having you.
Very, very well appreciated. We'll give you floor time. We'll give you floor time anytime you guys want to come and talk. Don't leave yet. Hey, don't leave. A couple of. Oh, okay. Marcia, you wanna unmute?
I am unmuted. This issue was brought to council in plenty of time that they could have done something sooner. And the major concern is that we already know of maybe 4 people that are running for mayor, is that we'll end up with another election in which we end up with a mayor that was not elected by majority. And that's a real issue. The
No, I
end.
hear you, and I'm, listen, I'm trying to be an eternal optimist. I will just say this. Even when there was possibility for runoff in Raleigh, we had very few runoffs. Only once ever since the 70s that a runoff changed the outcome. When you can look at Durham where they do a primary, the election results from primary night, when they were just whittling the field, was the same exact result on the general election night. Leo Williams won primary night, and then when it got whittled down to 2, he won the general night. Not with the majority one time, majority the time. So typically, I think my preference would be to have ranked choice voting, but that's a whole nother discussion. I hear you. But I think, you know, we are working to make the changes, but we have to operate sort of the parameters we have right now. And it's not just Raleigh, it's 11 of 12 that are in this vote. Cary still has odd year with the runoff. I don't even know if they had a runoff last.
I've got a couple of comments for you because I did listen while you were speaking. First of all, when we had the budget discussion, it was very disheartening to realize that only 1% of the budget is discretionary. What I mean by that, there is only 1% of the budget that is not committed to other purposes, whether it be capital improvements or just maintenance of the city itself. And it doesn't leave much leeway for other things like infrastructure expenditure. That's very bad. One of the suggestions when we talked about affordable housing during the budget session was the extra penny, as Jane has recommended, to tap that extra penny on for affordability. And I think that's something that's worth pursuing because we recognize it just wasn't before for the bond. And I think you guys need to keep flooding that money in to turn it back out for more affordable. It's the number one priority of the city, as far as I know. In terms of, I made myself a note here, you were talking about sewer property rights, and that's a hot topic actually, because we have a number of people here with the Big Branch Creek where little tributaries run through their backyards. Yet when a tree falls from their property into that little stream, it becomes an issue as to who has priority to take care of that tree. And a lot of times it falls on that property owner to remove that tree, where it shouldn't be, because you're doing the city a service by getting rid of that tree in something that was intended to be an outflow for the Big Branch Creek. So it's something I think in the end you need to take a look at. That's a hot issue, I guess. I have a note here and I can't read my own note. Oh, the retreat. You guys are going to go to Cary. Don't know why you're going to Cary, but I would hope I compare Cary a lot of times to the city of Raleigh because I like the way their city government functions. It seems to be more open than we have in Raleigh. It's one thing. I was just wondering if you're gonna, when you have your retreat in Cary, in addition to being probably sold on, the future of the soccer league in North Carolina, whether you're gonna get an opportunity to talk to some of the politicians in Cary, at least locally. And the other thing is when you go to Cary, you'll be right in the same area as Cary's new park, which was really well done. And I think we should take notes to do it on a smaller scale in Raleigh. And what they spent on it was far less than what we're spending for Dick's in the future. So that's the only things I just wanted to add.
Megan, do you know, are we gonna meet Carrie?
So we won't meet with Cary elected officials. We will meet with their staff about
Good.
how the city of Cary manages the soccer park and they have vending contracts. And so we'll talk with them about that. And we have some similar relationships, but I think we always have opportunities to learn. And then we will meet with the county commissioners in the evening. So obviously there's a county commissioner who represents the Cary area. But we have lots to discuss with them about the ways they plug into our alternative response unit, because they have a health and human services department that we do not, and that they have access to mental health resources and things that will be really essential to propping up our alternative response unit.
Yeah, the other thing I'd like you to talk to them about is the way they handle public comment. They've been doing open public comment for quite some time, whereas we were always told you can't do this and you can't do that. But I think the way they're doing it works very well.
At the county commission,
No, in this town of Cary, our sister city.
if you'd like to go to county commission public comment, they have one too. Meetings are on Monday.
Okay. I'll add that to my list. Do we have anything else from the audience? Anything at all?
Homer houses.
Yeah, I saw his
Is
comment.
there an item on your agenda for your retreat to, I've nominated the city to offer public comment because the numbers are outrageous. I would have to sit 5 speak like that. That doesn't make sense. I get paid too much. To waste my time sitting 5 hours listening to comments about something that you cannot or should not influence. So is there any?
We have
Yes,
an
there
agenda
will,
item
yeah.
on public comment.
The topic of public comment will be on our retreat agenda. And so we'll get a quick refresher from the attorney on what's required. And then I think we've all been brainstorming options for, like, one, I think we need to get to the spirit of, like, what is public comment for and who does it serve and what purpose, what's its role in the broader, system of governance. And then how do we make it work for us in this sort of standard times? And how do we make it work for us in these sort of surge capacity moments? And so I think we'll have a rich discussion about that. And I've been really clear that retreat facilitators, we need plenty of time to discuss that amongst ourselves.
I
So
think one question
more
from
to
us would be, is anybody screen the people that sign up to speak? Because now that you've removed addresses, when we look at the list, we can't tell who they are, where they're from. But I know it's still required when they sign up to speak. Because I find that a lot, it's a national issue, and what I find in a lot of other areas, people are actually being paid to stand out there and protest. And I don't know how far that goes for Raleigh. It's like something we never talk about, you know, outside influences in Raleigh, but
We do receive addresses, but at this point, we have not precluded people from participating
Right.
based on their address. I do think that's something that I know I want to.
I suggest you do some screening. It might help.
I think Raleigh residents should definitely have access to us in that space. I'm not sure about others.
Right.
Mhm.
David Ulmer had his hand up. David?
Yeah, I'll just echo the whole public comment though. It was bad maybe 2 years ago sometimes to listen to some of the comments, but it's not even City of Raleigh anymore. It's just kind of, I'm not even sure why you bother doing it. My only other comment, I know we talk about going around and kitchen doors and other stuff. I will say, me personally, I have always loved living in a city where if the state law doesn't work, we can just go to unisex bathrooms. And at the same time, it's not a deep blue city in a deep blue state with out of control housing, because when I look at those states that are deep blue cities and are deep blue states, you can't really point to some of those, AKA California, parts of Washington and Oregon, and say, yes, that's how it works. That's how to get to affordable housing. So I've always liked the check and balance system in this country. And I think it works wonderfully in this state, because even though the state and city people don't always get along, it seems very nice that you don't, because it keeps everybody in check. So just another observation. Maybe I'm on my own with that, but I do like that difference of opinions at the two levels.
Thank you, David.
And we do get along, and we have a fantastic lobbyist. We just don't often get what we.
Right. That's like us.
Yeah.
We do the same. That's why we come to you. Anybody else? Please, on the table back there, there's a city brochure on neighborhoods, which we hope to be part of that group in the near future. Oh, I guess. Come on. Can you guys see that on the screen? Yeah. Yeah, be glad to. This is what I foresee for our year for this year. Number one, promote the CAC and increase our outreach and our attendance. We used to do much better in this, but since COVID, we're having a hard time bringing back audiences. We try to use both the hybrid model, and having both in-house and virtual to try to do that. Costs money. We're going to try to increase our voluntary base for better functionality and future succession planning. Amend our bylaws for the addition of a treasurer, making the assumption that one way or another, we're going to try to either bring in donations or funding to help us get through the year of what we're doing. We're going to seek a renewed relationship with the city, including recognition of CACs and future integration with city outreach and engagement efforts, including the following, and you'll see this again: provide CACs with free monthly meeting places in a convenient city facility within the geography boundaries of each CAC. Access to city-owned technology for online meetings, like licensing for Zoom, and for equipment for meetings. Like we could, normally tonight, we would have had a microphone and a speaker to facilitate better communication. That person is out of town. And we don't have to worry about a projector, because fortunately this facility has a projector. Some level of financial support so we can grow our name, basically. And those are our objectives for this coming year. So as you have your discussion about CACs, we're done. Okay, I think we're good. I think we're ready to close off, and thank everybody for coming. And there's also information on there about the survey. Grab the survey when you leave. Grab brochures when you leave. Trying to empty my house of paper. Take something.